My name is Linda, and I am 70 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have said that my life was already written, every chapter complete, every page turned. I had a long marriage, children who grew into good people, and a quiet house that kept me safe. On paper, it seemed like I had everything a woman my age could want. But the truth is, once the sun went down and the house grew still, a hollow silence wrapped around me, and I felt something I never wanted to admit out loud, an emptiness that only deepened with time. I used to believe that love had a time limit, that after a certain age, especially after losing a partner, it simply faded into memory. You told yourself you had your chance, and that was enough. For a long time, I lived by that belief, but I've since learned how wrong I was. 17 years ago, I lost my husband, Richard. We had been married 37 years. He passed away in his sleep, and while everyone said it was peaceful, grief is never peaceful for the one left behind. The house that once echoed with his laughter slowly grew quieter. His jacket hung in the closet for over a decade. His reading glasses stayed on the nightstand, untouched. I even kept making 2 cups of coffee every morning, out of habit, only to pour one down the drain while whispering, "Morning, Rich." Little rituals like that became my way of surviving. The days felt long, so I filled them with tasks that looked purposeful. I volunteered at the food pantry, joined the ladies' circle at church, knitted scarves and blankets for the children's hospital. From the outside, I looked busy, maybe even strong. People would tell me, "Linda, you're such a pillar." But inside, I knew the truth. Strength and numbness can look an awful lot alike. I wasn't thriving. I was just existing. Evenings were the hardest. I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees, and the quiet would remind me how alone I was. Sometimes I'd flip through old photo albums, running my fingers across pictures of vacations, Christmas mornings, birthday cakes with candles lit. The memories were warm, but the warmth didn't reach me. They felt like a life I once lived, but could no longer touch. Then, out of nowhere, life gave me a small jolt, a reminder that it still had plans for me. It happened on a rainy Thursday. I was at the grocery store, rushing too quickly across the produce aisle. My shoes slipped on the wet tile, and I landed awkwardly on my knee. It wasn't a dramatic fall, but it was enough to swell my leg and make driving impossible for a while. That's when my neighbor's son, Caleb, stepped in. He was 44, polite, the kind of man who usually just waved across the driveway, but never lingered. When he heard what happened, he knocked on my door and said, "Miss Linda, I can take you to your physical therapy appointment tomorrow. It's no trouble at all." I tried to protest, embarrassed. "Oh, Caleb, you don't need to bother yourself with me." But he just smiled and said, "It's not a bother. Really, I insist." And the next morning, there he was, leaning against his old pickup truck, waiting to drive me. The trip to the clinic wasn't long, 15 minutes at most. But in that short time, something unexpected happened. We talked. Not just polite conversation, but real talk. We laughed about the town gossip, compared our favorite pie shops, and discovered we both loved old books. Somewhere along that road, I laughed harder than I had in years. Not the polite chuckle you give when someone tells a joke, but the kind of laugh that shakes your shoulders and makes you forget, even for a moment, how heavy life has been. At first, I brushed it off. He was just being kind, I told myself. A younger man helping an older neighbor, nothing more. But kindness turned into something more lasting. Caleb started showing up again. He carried my groceries inside when I struggled. He fixed the cabinet door that had squeaked for years. One evening, he left a box of lemon bars on my porch with a note that said, "Fresh from the bakery. No reason you should eat alone." I stared at that note for the longest time, and I felt something stir inside me, something I thought had gone quiet forever. The weeks after that first ride with Caleb slipped into something I didn't expect. He kept showing up, not in a way that felt overwhelming, but in small, steady ways that quietly softened the edges of my days. He would knock on the door with a bag of groceries if he was heading back from town, or ask if I wanted to ride along to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. Sometimes he just sat with me on the porch while the evening crickets chirped. At first, I kept telling myself, this is silly. I'm too old for this. He's just being kind. But every time he lingered a little longer, every time his smile made me laugh without even realizing it, I felt something stir that I thought had gone buried with Richard. One evening stands out in my mind as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting on the porch, wrapped in my favorite cardigan, a cup of peppermint tea warming my hands. Caleb leaned forward in his chair, his elbows resting on his knees. After a long stretch of silence, he asked quietly, "Do you ever miss being seen?" The question hit me harder than I expected. For years, people had complimented me, my cooking, my helpfulness, my strength, but no one had asked that, to be seen. I swallowed hard before answering. Every single day. He didn't look away. His eyes softened and he said, "I see you, Linda." Something shifted inside me at that moment, not because of the words themselves, but because I believed him. And belief, after so many years of emptiness, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. After that night, our time together deepened. We started having dinners, sometimes simple sandwiches on the porch, sometimes takeout from the diner down the road. We walked through the park on crisp afternoons, the leaves crunching under our shoes, and I caught myself smiling just because he was beside me. Sometimes we watched old movies on my couch, and when I laughed, it wasn't the hollow laugh of habit, it was real, full, alive. But the truth is, I wrestled with guilt. I kept hearing Richard's voice in my mind as if I were betraying him by enjoying someone else's company. For weeks, I argued with myself, whispering, "You're too old. This isn't right. People will talk." Yet, every time Caleb reached for the dishes after dinner or fixed the loose board on the porch without being asked, I realized something. It wasn't about replacing Richard. It was about remembering that I was still here. Still a woman, still alive. One afternoon, the emotions finally spilled out. We were sitting in my living room, the scent of coffee filling the air, when I told him everything. I admitted how invisible I had felt since Richard died, how I stopped seeing myself as a woman and started seeing myself only as a memory, a relic others kept around out of respect. My voice cracked as I said it. And before I could hide my tears, Caleb reached across the table and took my hand. He said, "Linda, you're not a memory. You're a moment I don't want to miss." The tears came harder then, but for the first time in years, they weren't from sadness. They were from feeling truly alive again. We never rushed into anything physical, and I didn't want to. What grew between us wasn't about rushing. It was about presence, about feeling wanted, chosen, even at 70. Wrinkles, gray hairs, scars, none of it mattered. His presence reminded me that life doesn't stop giving us chances. It's just that too often we stop believing they exist. And at 70 years old, I'm glad I finally did.